An unimaginable scene finally happened. Jeon Jungkook, the figure who has always been known as strong and rarely shows his emotions in public, was seen crying sobbing in Kim Taehyung's arms after uttering a sentence that left thousands of fans in silence. This moment not only left a big question mark, but also caused an emotional shock that is difficult to understand. What really happened behind those tears? Why could such a personal event leave such a deep wound for ARMY all over the world? This incident emerged in an atmosphere that was initially full of warmth and appreciation, but turned into a shocking turning point. Taehyung, who has long been known to have a close bond with Jungkook, was suddenly mentioned as the center of that emotional expression. The short sentence that came out of Jungkook's mouth before he finally could not hold back his tears became the core of this great puzzle. That sentence did not only sound like an ordinary statement, but as a symbol of the emotional burden he had been holding back. The question then arises, was this merely a spontaneous outburst, or is there a shocking fact hidden behind it? The recording of the moment spread quickly through various platforms, showing Jungkook's face wet with tears, while Taehyung seemed to try to calm him with a tight hug. Not a few judged that this was a true picture of a relationship far deeper than just ordinary friendship. But is that really so? Or are there more complex reasons that they do not want to reveal openly to the public? This fact seemed to signal that something big was happening, something that could not possibly be simply overlooked by fans who have always faithfully followed their journey. The context surrounding this incident actually made everything even more mysterious. Some witnesses said that before the crying moment, Jungkook had said a sentence in a heavy tone that sounded like a confession, although not entirely clear. The short but meaningful sentence was enough to drastically change the atmosphere. When many people were hoping for a celebration full of joy, instead a bitter reality slipped into the middle of the event. How could something that seemed simple shake feelings this deeply? For some ARMY, those tears were considered as proof of the extraordinary pressure Jungkook had been holding in. Some speculated that his tears were a form of emotional honesty toward Taehyung, the person who has always been considered to understand him best. But is that really all? Isn't it too easy to simplify an event so full of symbols like this? The shocking fact that made ARMY stunned was not just the tears themselves, but Jungkook's courage to show his vulnerability in front of Taehyung, in front of the public, and in front of the world. A number of fans linked this incident with various rumors that had previously circulated about the distance created between the two. This hug moment instead broke speculation about their estranged relationship, while also raising a new question. Is there actually a bigger conflict that has not been revealed? And are these tears a reaction to something more serious? The sentence Jungkook uttered before crying became the main key. Unfortunately, until now no one can be certain of the exact contents of that sentence, because it was only heard in fragments, faint, yet strong enough to create different interpretations. Was that sentence an apology? Or was it in fact a confession he had kept tightly all along? Why only to Taehyung did he dare to pour out that feeling? These questions haunt the fans' discussion spaces, making them immerse in endless analysis. Some even considered that this moment was the culmination of a long dynamic that was never seen on the surface. Is it true that Jungkook was trying to give a signal that something big had been tightly hidden from the public? ARMY shock was born not only from Jungkook's tears, but also from Taehyung's reaction that seemed calm, yet full of meaning. The hug he gave was not merely a physical gesture, but a symbol of deep emotional support. Why did Taehyung seem already prepared to face that moment, as if he knew Jungkook was carrying a burden he could not bear alone? This is the fact that made many people believe this incident was not a coincidence. Many also linked Jungkook's tears with pressures coming from outside. Was that statement related to their journey in the entertainment world full of controversies? Were those tears born from exhaustion, disappointment, or even regret over something he could not control? ARMY was divided between those who saw this as a personal emotional moment and those who judged this as a reflection of a great conflict that might involve more parties. But one thing is certain. The silence created after that moment was real evidence of how deep the impact was. This incident forces us all to ask, what is the true meaning of Jungkook's tears? Was he sending a message to ARMY, or only to Taehyung? The shocking fact that made ARMY stunned lies precisely in that uncertainty. In the midst of popular culture that always puts forward perfection, Jungkook instead showed his most human side: tears. Tears that cannot be faked, cannot be polished, and cannot be hidden. If this moment truly becomes a sign of something greater, are we ready to accept the real truth? Was Taehyung's hug only support, or was it in fact a symbol of deeper involvement in Jungkook's life story? These questions continue to haunt, without any certainty that can directly answer them. But it is precisely that uncertainty that makes this incident increasingly memorable, increasingly difficult to forget, and increasingly tense for anyone who witnessed it. Perhaps this is the time to admit that this event was not just an ordinary emotional moment. Jungkook's tears, the sentence he uttered, and Taehyung's hug became a series of facts that shook, that made ARMY all over the world trapped in mixed feelings: touched, sad, shocked, and at the same time curious. No one can be certain of the truth behind it, but the impact is already clear, a big question that will continue to hang without an answer. And behind that question lies the bitter reality that even a figure as great as Jungkook cannot always hold back tears when reality finally breaks to the surface. Jungkook's tears that fell in Taehyung's hug were not just a momentary emotional event. For ARMY, that moment was immediately linked to his birthday, which had not long passed. Every year, Jungkook's birthday is always a global celebration, colored with various greetings, support, and even major projects carried out by fans all over the world. But this time, there was something different. Behind the smile and the words of thanks he delivered in front of the public was hidden a fragile feeling that finally broke in front of Taehyung. The question is, why did Jungkook show the most vulnerable side of himself precisely on his own special moment? A birthday for an idol as big as Jungkook is not just a personal moment. It is an event that involves millions of people. From giant billboards in various countries, charity events carried out in his name, to global trending topics that are always created, Jungkook's birthday has transformed into an annual phenomenon celebrated like a world festival. But behind that euphoria, many forget that Jungkook is only a young man bearing extraordinarily huge expectations. How could someone continue to show a happy face when the whole world demands him to always be perfect? When ARMY celebrated his birthday with full love, Jungkook was instead in a heavy inner struggle. The tears that exploded in Taehyung's hug seemed to be proof that behind the lively celebration, he stored weariness, loneliness, and at the same time longing for freedom. A birthday, which should be a symbol of happiness, instead opened old wounds that might have long been buried. Did Jungkook feel that all the greetings and celebrations were not enough to heal the emptiness he felt? Or was there something else more personal that made him collapse at a time when everyone expected him to smile? For many fans, Jungkook's birthday is a way to show boundless love. But did he himself feel the same? On several occasions, Jungkook did admit he was always grateful for the great attention given by ARMY, but the tears that fell in Taehyung's hug signaled that behind that gratitude there was an emotional burden difficult for him to express. Could it be that his birthday event this year was precisely the main trigger for that emotional outburst? If observed closely, this emotional pattern did not appear suddenly. In recent years, every time his birthday arrived, Jungkook seemed increasingly quiet, as if keeping something he never truly revealed. ARMY who are observant would certainly notice this change. From a cheerful teenager who accepted the celebration with a wide smile, to an adult man who began to show a serious side, full of reflection, even vulnerable. Is this a sign that as he grows older, it becomes increasingly difficult for him to hide the wounds he carries? The tears that occurred in Taehyung's hug seemed to be the culmination point of feelings that had long piled up. Many suspected that the sentence he uttered before crying was closely related to gratitude as well as the pain he experienced every time his birthday came. Perhaps that sentence was the honest expression of someone who felt loved, but also felt burdened by that love. Was Jungkook truly saying that he could no longer bear all the expectations? Or did he feel guilty because he could not return equally the love he received? Taehyung, who was by his side at that time, seemed to understand what Jungkook could not fully say. The hug he gave was a symbol of silence full of meaning, as if saying he understood without needing to hear further explanation. At this point, ARMY began connecting Jungkook's birthday with his tears moment. As if there was a red thread that could not be ignored, the grand global celebration apparently hid deep personal sadness. This was the fact that shocked ARMY, because no one expected that behind the cheerfulness of celebrating their idol's birthday, there was such a heavy feeling stored. How could someone praised by millions of people, loved unconditionally by fans all over the world, instead feel empty on his birthday? This question became a bitter reflection for everyone. Perhaps this is the reality rarely seen. Overflowing love does not always equal the happiness felt. Jungkook, though surrounded by love, still felt a loneliness that could not be covered. Was it because that love came too massively, too greatly, until it lost its personal meaning? Or was it because behind all that, there was a part of him that felt he never truly was free to be himself? This feeling seemed to explode at that moment. Jungkook cried, not because he did not appreciate the love from ARMY, but precisely because he was too aware of how great that love was. He felt small before the sea of support, felt fragile when realizing that behind all the spotlight, he was only an ordinary human with limitations. And in Taehyung's hug, he finally found a safe space to let it all go. This was the shocking fact that made ARMY speechless, because they realized Jungkook had been carrying a burden perhaps far heavier than they had ever imagined. If this moment was truly related to his birthday, then clearly a day that should bring happiness instead opened emotional wounds not easily healed. Did Jungkook all this time feel that his birthday was more a symbol of burden than happiness? Did he feel that the day was more about others' expectations than about himself? These questions continue to haunt, creating anxiety as well as deep sympathy from fans who do not want to see their idol suffering in silence. This moment also opened debate about how a public figure celebrates his birthday. Does a grand global celebration truly bring happiness? Or does it in fact make the birthday a harsh reminder that their life is no longer personal, but belongs to the public? Jungkook seemed to be at that crossroads, between happiness because he was loved and suffocation because of losing personal space. His tears and Taehyung's hug were the reflection of that dilemma. For ARMY, this became an emotional call hard to ignore. Those who usually only focused on celebrating with noise were now forced to pause for a moment and ask, was Jungkook truly happy on his birthday? Were his tears a silent request that they understand his feelings more, not only idolize him endlessly? The shocking fact that made ARMY stunned was the reality that although they gave everything, Jungkook's happiness still could not be guaranteed. In the end, Jungkook's birthday moment, which should have been a party full of lights, instead turned into a tense collective reflection. His tears, the vague sentence he uttered, and Taehyung's hug became a series of symbols that could not be taken lightly. It was not just an emotional event, but a serious signal about the feelings of an idol that might have long been forgotten. A birthday celebrated by the world apparently could also become the loneliest moment for the person who was the center of that celebration. And there stood Jungkook, a young man crying in his friend's hug, leaving a big question. Was the happiness he had shown all this time truly real? Or was it only a mask slowly crumbling on the day that should have been the happiest for him? The incident of Jungkook reportedly crying in Taehyung's hug after uttering a mysterious sentence still leaves a big question mark. But the most fundamental question is, was this event truly real, or was it only a fabrication deliberately created to attract public and media attention? This question must be asked seriously, because in today's digital era, the boundary between reality and manipulation is increasingly blurred. Were we witnessing sincere truth, or only a product of a narrative designed with a certain purpose? The recordings circulating on various platforms like TikTok, YouTube, and video snippets on Twitter seemed convincing to most fans. But could those recordings be taken as valid evidence? Are we sure that what we saw was a complete picture of reality? Or was it a snippet deliberately chosen to create dramatic effect? When such an emotional moment is spread massively without proper verification, doesn't that open a great possibility that the public is being directed to believe something that is not necessarily true? Many fans were carried away by that scene. They believed that Jungkook's tears were a manifestation of his sincere feelings. But was that belief born from objective data or only from emotional interpretation? Isn't it human nature to believe what fits their own hopes and feelings? When ARMY saw Jungkook cry, they immediately connected it with the narrative of personal closeness between him and Taehyung. But was there real evidence that the sentence Jungkook uttered was truly addressed to Taehyung with such deep meaning? On the other hand, we cannot close our eyes that the global entertainment industry often relies on sensational strategies to maintain its artists' relevance. Could it be that this moment was only part of a big strategy deliberately displayed? If so, who actually benefited from the virality of this event? Was it Jungkook and Taehyung themselves, ARMY as consumers, or instead the big company behind them? This question must be thought about seriously, because without critical awareness, we all risk becoming victims of a narrative game we never controlled. The sources of information circulating also need to be questioned. TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter are free public spaces where anyone can upload, edit, and manipulate content. Is it reasonable for us to trust the truth of video snippets that may have already been edited, given additional narrative, or even cut to support a certain conclusion? Shouldn't we be careful before making visual snippets the basis of belief? ARMY who were shocked by this moment may have forgotten to ask, were we truly seeing reality? Or were we only seeing what was intended to be shown to us? Why did those video snippets appear at certain times? Was this a coincidence? Or was there a certain agenda being played? What if the event we believed was emotional and sincere was only part of a scenario already designed? This reflection is important because the phenomenon of emotional manipulation through social media is happening more often. How can we be certain that the tears we saw were truly born from sadness, not merely a moment exaggerated? Was it true that Jungkook could not hold back his emotions? Or was that moment captured from a certain angle to create a dramatic impression? If we cannot answer this question with certainty, doesn't that mean the truth we believe in is still fragile? Furthermore, are we aware that news, articles, and scripts like this have the potential to create collective bias? With emotional presentation, readers can easily believe that the event is absolute truth. But isn't our duty as readers to question every information we receive, no matter how convincing it seems? What if all this was merely a hoax deliberately created for the sake of sensationalism, for clicks, for attention, and for economic gain? These questions cannot be ignored. Do you truly believe that Jungkook cried in Taehyung's hug for purely emotional reasons? Or are you beginning to doubt that all this was only a narrative built so the event could go viral? If this event was true, then of course there was a deep emotional impact for both of them and for ARMY. But if it was not, doesn't that mean we were all deceived by a machine of sensation working so neatly? This tension actually shows how important skepticism is in responding to every information. Will we only be passive consumers who swallow every news raw, or will we stand as critical individuals who dare to question and are not easily trapped in the current of euphoria? Skepticism does not mean rejecting everything, but giving room to think, analyze, and question. Is this fact or manipulation? We need to remember that truth in the social media era is never simple. Videos, photos, and narratives can be fabricated easily. Haven't there been many examples where video snippets turned out misleading because the original context was completely different? What if this Jungkook and Taehyung moment also experienced the same? Are you sure you want to believe it without further verification? Thus, every reader must reconsider their position. Do you prefer to be swept away in emotions created by the media, or do you want to take a reflective step to ensure whether this moment is real or merely fabricated? Isn't it wiser if we restrain ourselves from rushing to conclusions while waiting for evidence that can truly be accounted for? If this event was real, then it is natural if ARMY felt shocked, sad, and shaken. But if it turned out to be only a product of sensationalism, doesn't that mean our emotions were exploited for certain interests? Are you willing for your emotions to be used only for others' gain? Are you aware that your involvement in spreading this narrative actually enlarged the space for false sensations? In the end, the fundamental question remains the same. Are we witnessing the truth? Or are we only becoming part of a big game that exploits Jungkook and Taehyung's big names to create mass attention? The answer is not yet certain. But it is precisely this uncertainty that should make us pause for a moment, think critically, and refuse to become victims of a narrative that may not be true.